Kishem shenisucho b'kedusha, kach sreifaso b'kedusha. Okay. Now, the nisuch hayayin obviously is in the azara. It's on the mizbeach, and the Gemara is saying now that by analogy, the sreifa, when we collect the yayin that settled down over the course of this time period, and we have to burn the yayin, that also should be in the azara. My mashma, where do you see that indicated by the pasuk b'kodesh haseich neseh sheichar Hashem? So the Gemara says, Omer Avina, Asya Kodesh Kodesh. We have a Gzeir Shava Kodesh Kodesh. Siv Hacha, our pasuk says, Ba Kodesh Haseich Nesech. And we're talking about Nesech. Nesech means Niskei Yayin. And it says Ba Kodesh, Uksiv Hasam. And with regard to Sreifas Nosa, which is Basar Azevach, beyond its allotted time, the Torah requires us to burn it. It says, "V'sarafto as hanosar ba'esh lo ye'achel ki kodesh hu." Same word, kodesh. That gives us a gzeir shav of kodesh kodesh, and that is going to say that just like with regard to nosar, we have a mitzvah sreifa, so too with regard to yayin of niskei yayin, we need sreifa. And sreifa always has to be in the azara. In any event, we came to the conclusion now, based on Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok, that he disagrees with the Rabbanon as far as the shisim is concerned. According to Rabbi Elazar, the shisim went into this lul, which is basically a very limited space. It would fill up. Whereas the Chachamim say this was almost like an endless pit underground. Let's look at a Mishnah, and we're going to try to figure out, based on the Mishnah, I believe this Mishnah is in Masechet Me'ilah, Keman Azla Hadisnan. Can we analyze this Mishnah in Me'ilah and determine which of the two shittas about the shisim does that Mishnah reflect? The Mishnah says, Nisachim. Nisachim batchila molim bohem. In other words, before the Nisach Hayayin, when the Yayin was put into the clay shares, it was sanctified with Kedushas HaGuf. And at that point, you would violate the Isur Me'ilah if you would benefit from the Yayin. Yardal Shitim, now he's already poured the Yayin from the Klishares, and it's going down into the Shitim. Ein Ma'alim B'hem. There's no longer a din of Me'ilah. Now, wait a second. What do you mean, Ein Ma'alim B'hem? Where is the Yayin? In order to talk about Me'ilah, you have to talk about having access to the Yayin. But according to the Rabbanon, the Yayin went all the way down to the Tahom. No one could get access to the Yayin. Lema Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok. This would only make sense, according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok, who understood that there was just a small space in that open area between the Kevish and the Mizbeach, and that's where the Yayin from Nisach HaYayin was collected. In fact, the Pirchei Kuna once in a while would go down there and collect the Yayin. So therefore the Yayin is accessible. And the Mishnah wants to tell me there's no longer a din of Me'ilah. The Rabbanon, but according to Rabbanon that the Shisim go all the way down to the center of the universe, is Ha Nachatu Lahu L'Tahom. How can you even discuss the possibility, raise the option of Me'ilah? There's no access to the Yayin. So my answer is no. Afilu Teimar Rabbanon, there may be various scenarios in which the Yayin did not go all the way down to the Tahom. For example, one case would be B'de Iklat. That somehow he put a kli inside the shisim, and he was able to catch the wine before it went all the way down. Ika diamri, or alternatively, lema rabbanan he velo Rabbi Elazar tzaddik. On the contrary, the Gemara says we must be talking about some case where they intercepted the yayin according to Rabbanan before they went down to the Tahom. We mentioned one example where it was intercepted b'de ikla. However, I believe there are other Rishonim that say that perhaps some of the yayin got caught on the sides of the chisim. But in any event, I'm going to prove to you, says the Gemara in the Ika the Amri, that Adarabah, the Mishnah Meila must be reflecting the sheet of the Chachamim. The Rabbi Elazar, Akati b'kedusha sayu kaimet. How do I prove the conclusion that according to Rabbi Elazar Tzaddik, the yayin still has kedusha saguf? It was Rabbi Elazar Tzaddik who said that the Pirchei Kahuna would collect the congealed yayin, and then they would have a sreifa in the azara. The fact that we require sreifa indicates that it still maintains its status as kedusha guf. And if that be the case, how could the Mishnah Meila say that yardu l'shisim ain't molim b'hem? What do you mean ain't molim b'hem? According to Rabbi Elazar Tzaddik, they're still endowed with kedusha guf by virtue of their status as kedusha guf is meila. So how can you tell me yardu l'shisim ain't molim b'hem? Gemara says no. Afilu teim Rabbi Elazar. We have another reason why there is meila. I'm sorry, there's no meila. Now here, Rabosai, just by word of introduction, in kedusha saguf there are two dimensions. One is called Iser Hana, and the other is called Iser Me'ila. And let me explain the difference. The Iser Me'ila, which would generate a carbon Me'ila if somebody violated it, that only exists for a certain period of time. Meaning, I don't mean a period of time, but I mean, it's not absolutely permanent. Whereas Iser Hana is permanent. The Me'ila dimension is a reflection of the fact that this object, this Kodesh, is earmarked for the Mizbeach. If you steal it from the Mizbeach, that's called Me'ila, that's theft. You're embezzling the Mizbeach. On the other hand, the Iser Hana continues forever and ever. Once the Kedusha was chal in the very physical object, then the Iser Hana continues, because again, the Iser Hana is a reflection of the Kodesh, whereas Me'ila is a reflection of the fact that it's earmarked for the mitzvah. And the nafkamina is going to be after he fulfills the mitzvah. For example, Nisach Hayayin, after the Nisach, we can remove Me'ila because it's what we call Nases Mitzvah. So the mitzvah was already accomplished. The Mizbeach is no longer claiming it because there was already a Nisa. But the Iser Hana is going to continue by virtue of the basic physical Shem Kodesh, and therefore we require Sreif. So that's what the Gemara says. Once the mitzvah on the Mizbeach was fulfilled, is no longer Me'ila. As far as Sreifa is concerned, we still require Sreifa. That's why the Pirchei Kahuna had to gather together the Yayin and burn it in the Azar because of the Iser Hana, which is a reflection of the Shem Kodesh. So you could have something that's endowed with Kedusha. It requires Sreifa b'makom Kadosh, but there's no Me'ila. Omar Reish Lakish. Bizman shemenaschim yayin al gabi mizbeach pokikin es hashitim. This is a whole different shita. Until now, let's take the Rabbanan shita. The yayin goes all the way down to Tahom, and Reish Lakish disagrees. Pokakin es hashita. Pokakin means to clog something up. And the wine had to sort of rise. So if you clog up the hole, then the more yayin that goes down through the shitim, through the nisach process, there's going to be a backup of wine. And Reish Lakish thinks that to beautify the mizbeach, we need that backup of wine. Benemar, Bakodesh Haseich Nesech Sheichar Lashem. And now we're talking about Nesech, which is Nisach HaYayin, and Bakodesh, which is an allusion to the Mizbeach, Sheichar. It should be like Sheichar. Sheichar is a biblical word that corresponds to the generic category of any alcoholic beverage. Again, it translates as beer, but it refers to all intoxicating beverages. Amar Rav Papa, Sheichar Lashon Shesia, Lashon Svia, Lashon Shikrus. So the word Sheichar has three implications. Number one, something that you drink, it's a beverage. Number two, Svia, you become satiated by it. And number three, it intoxicates you. That's what the word Sheichar means. Okay. So that, again, this entire process of fulfilling the mitzvah of Nisach HaYayin al Gabi Mizbeach is all part of the mitzvah of Simcha. So we want to have Simcha, we want to have an abundance of wine, we want to beautify and decorate the Mizbeach. All this, according to Reish Lakish, is accomplished by Pokakin. Now, the Gemara sort of goes off on a tangent and derives a conclusion from Reish Lakish's statement and his drasha, and that conclusion seems to be just a good recommendation for those who like to drink wine. But I think there's a lot more to it. Amar Papa Shmamina, let's derive from Reish Lakish, ki savea inish chamra migrone sava. In other words, the svia, which means the ultimate enjoyment of drinking wine, comes from the fact that he takes a gmia of wine, how would you translate that? Maybe gulp of wine into his throat, and his throat enjoys. It's not what you call hadmas hakeres, it's not the stomach, but rather the throat. In other words, there's a difference between enjoying wine and enjoying food. You enjoy food, not just because it goes into your throat, but because it goes down to your stomach and you feel satiated. But satiation from wine is not in the stomach, it's in the throat. Omar Rava, Tzurva Mirabanan, Delo Nafesh Le Chamra, a Talmud Chacham who doesn't have a large volume of wine, Ligma Gmue. And Rashi learns Ligma Gmue means he should swallow gulps of wine. He has only a very limited amount of wine. He has two choices. He can drink it small amounts at a time or drink a large gulp. He should be recommended to drink a large gulp. And even though he's a Talmud Chacham, and it looks a little bit odd that he's, gulping down so much wine at once, he shouldn't be bothered by that. Why? Because wine is being drunk in a kosher bracha, in a kosher kiddush, kosher avdol, etc., etc. And we want to beautify the mitzvah, and we do so by drinking gulps of wine. Rava kased birchasa agme gmue. And Rava, when he recited kiddush or avdollah or birchas erusin, whatever it might be on a kosher bracha, then he would gulp down the wine. in order to upgrade the satiation, the sphere, and that's l'chvod, that's a hidur mitzvah. Now the Marsha interprets this Gemara just the opposite as Rashi. And the Marsha says that if you have a limited amount of wine, then you drink it piecemeal in smaller amounts. And he proves it from the meaning of the word gemia, which he quotes, by Rivka. It says there, Hagmi'ini no ma'at mai. Anyway, it's a whole theory. And the poskim, by the way, have enough gemina, because let's say, for example, you have to drink wine, which is non-kosher wine, because of pikuach nefesh, that's to save someone's life. But the halacha is, this is the Sefer HaCharedim, says that you should try to minimize the hana that you have. I don't want to go into too much detail, but let's say they put you on an erva, then you should wait until you remove your body from the erva, not to have too much pleasure. I don't want to go into too much detail. But in the case of wine, if let's say they force you at gunpoint, or you're talking about a pikuach nefesh situation, the only wine he can get access to, or any other beverage that's intoxicating, is non-kosher, then there's going to be enough gemina how he should minimize his pleasure. Again, he's allowed to drink, and assuming he'll be saved in either way, he'll save his life. Again, if he won't save his life, he takes it. So the Marsha would advocate in favor of drinking large gulps, and Rashi would advocate in favor of drinking smaller amounts. Anyway, Darash Rava, my dichsiv pasuk in Shir Shirim, my yafu pa mayech bana olim as nediv. Now the word na'olim means sandals or shoes, but if you take apart that word, the shorish of the word has the ayin lamed yud, which is aliyah. So that Rava is going to see in this pasuk an allusion to aliyah l'regel, and God is calling the Jewish people for ole regel as nediv. Nediv is like a very important person. Ma yafu pamoseim shel Yisrael. The word pamayach means the stepping, the walking. B'shah sha'olim l'regel. Bas nediv bito shel Avram Avinu shenikra nediv. The Torah describes Avram Avinu as nediv, and this is a pasuk in Tehillim, shenemar, and we recite this before shofar blowing, nedive amim nesafu am elokei Avraham, meaning the peoples of the earth imitated Avram's breakthrough monotheism, and they accepted the God. So this is called Elokei Avraham, and Avram here is being described as an nediv. And Avram Avinu really represents the whole process of gerus, of self-sacrifice, of genuine and sincere craving for Hashem. Elokei Avraham v'lo Elokei Yitzchak v'Yaakov. The pasuk describes Elokei Avraham. Elokei Avraham shayatchila legerim. He was the trailblazer. And basically, the word nediv means someone who has a nedivus halev. His heart prompts him on a voluntary basis. And Avram Avinu searched for God in a world of polytheism, and that was because of his motivation. And a ger is compared in that sense to Avram, who's the father of all gerim. And apparently, when the people went on Aliyah to Regel, they left behind them. I don't know if they were Breslevs, but everyone went on Aliyah to Yerushalayim, right? So they left behind them their family. Well, sometimes the family would join them, and they left behind them their possessions and their business dealings. There was a great deal of sacrifice. There was a genuine love for Hashem. And therefore, the pasuk compares the Ole Regel to Bas Nediv. They are the extension of the legacy of Avram Avinu. Tana debei Rav Hanan, Maitasiv, Chabuke Yerechayef. This is a pasuk that we quote at the beginning of this discussion to derive the Shita. Lama nimshlu divrei Torah ki yerech. This pasuk is an allusion to divrei Torah, because the pasuk speaks about the handiwork of God, and that is a reference, an allusion to the Torah itself, which was given at Har Sinai, and the Luchos HaBris were carved out and created by Hashem. But why compare Torah to a Yerech? A Yerech, we said, was concealed. We don't study Torah on the mountaintops, in the public marketplaces. Torah requires a certain tznius. Otherwise, you get you get distracted and so forth and so on. Torah should be studied in a private area. I don't know if you need capsules, but okay. Behind Domer Abulazar, my dechsiva pasuk Micha, Higid lecha adam atov u'mashem dorich mimcha. Very famous pasuk. Ki yemasos mishpat vavas chesed vatznei leches im elokecha. What is the essence of what God, is asking? It is all of the above. Asos mishpat zadin. I mean, those are the logical mitzvahs. And avas chesed is chesed gemilas chasod. Then we take the dead out, and it's usually a very public, burial. But nevertheless, we should do it with a certain tznius to it. And also, when we take the kal out, it's but let's not get too carried away with frivolity and so forth. So there should be a certain discreetness about it. Is therefore dvarm shedarkon lasosu b'tzina lachas kam v'kama. We're going to derive from this that Succah should be given without all the fanfare. You don't have to give it publicly. Don't make such a big deal about it. It should be done with tznius. Amar Abulazar gadol oset Succah yoser mikol karbanos. Succah is greater than karbanos. Shenemar asos Succah mishpat nivchar Hashem lemizbeach. In other words, nivchar means it is superior to the sacrifices that are brought on the Mizbeach. And this also refers to charity of tzedakah, because when one performs tzedakah, then tzedakah has a kapara power, even for zdonos, even for deliberate sins. And that makes it greater than karbanos, because karbanos only mechaper for shkagos. Also, tzedakah doesn't require the Beis Hamikdash. The Amar Abulazar Gedolah Gemilas Chasad Yosef and Tzedakah Shenemar Ziru Lachem Litzedakah Pasuk Hosea. The Kitzru Lefi Chesed. So tzedakah is identified as Zriya, which is only sowing the land, putting in the seeds. And chesed is described as kitzru. Kitzru is when we get the main benefit, when we harvest the growth, the produce. Im adam zoreya sofik ochel sofik ein ochel. I don't know if the seeds will take, but adam kotzer vadei ochel. He certainly has the produce in his hands. And in a case of tzedakah, we really, it's iffy. I don't know. I give tzedakah. I'll tell you the honest truth. I never know where it's going and how much they shave off the top, all the askanim and so forth and so on. But chesed is a personal involvement. That's 100% pure chesed. Amar Abulazar, ein tzedakah mishtalemes el fi chesed sheba. Even when you do tzedakah, it should be with chesed. Figure out how to give to the ani in a way that's even more kind, doing it privately, or instead of forcing him to come to you, maybe you go to him, or if you can give him money that he can invest, and so forth and so on. You have to, tzedakah should be done with a thought out process. Shenemar ziru lachem litzedakah, kitzru lefi chesed. A pasuk in, I think it's in, I'm not sure where it is. Okay, that's because I left my Gemara in the Emek learning. So anybody know where that pasuk is? Still have 4 minutes. I think maybe it's a hemshech of the pasuk in Hosea, maybe. So the pasuk says that we're talking about tzedakah, but kitzru Ru lefi chesed. The ktsira should be with chesed. So ktsira is the ultimate success of the tzedakah. Three dimensions. Gemilas chasadim surpasses tzedakah. Number one, tzedakah b'mamono. Tzedakah refers to charity with one's money. Gemilas chasadim bein begufo bein b'mamono. If you can help a person physically, and tzedakah laniyim, tzedakah is only for poor people. Gemilas chasadim bein laniyim bein lashirim. Even a rich person needs your chesed sometimes. He needs your help. He might be down, and you could uplift him. Tzedakah l'chaim, and charity could only be performed with the living. You can't give charity to the dead, but gemilas chasadim bein l'chaim ubein l'mesim. When you take a mess out to bury him, and perhaps even nicham amelim, that's chesed b'mesim. Omer Rabbi Elazar kol ha'oseh tzedakah mishpat. If he does tzedakah and mishpat, Ke'ilu mile kol ha'olam kulo chesed. He fills the entire world with stuff, with chesed. It means even though whatever monies he had, he gave a small amount, but that's what he could afford. That's going to have a tremendous impact on the whole world, and it becomes a world filled with chesed. Shenemar, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, Oiv tzedakah mishpat chesed Hashem ol haaretz. Shema Tomer kol habol likvot kofetz. You think it's very easy, just jump into it and give tzedakah. No. Talmud lo my yakar. Yakar means rare. It's very rare. Chesed chalokim, and chesed is rare because you have to really think it all out to make sure you do it in the right way. Yachal af yirei shamayim king. What about someone who's God fearing? Will he have separate siyat d'shmaya? Talmud lo mer chesed Hashem me'olam v'ad olam al yireov, which means the pasuk in Tehillim indicates that Hashem will guide a tzaddik to do a yirei shamayim, to do to give his tzedakah and do his chesed in the right way. Omar Rav Chama bar Papa kol adam sheyesh alav chen. If a person, when you see his countenance, you feel a certain attraction. You respect him. He has a certain beautiful chen on his face. Is then biyadua. You don't have to even think about it twice. Who yirei shamayim? Yirei shamayim endows a person with chen. Shenemar, as the pasuk says. Again, we're looking at Tehillim. Is chesed Hashem me'olam v'ad olam al yireov. Two interpretations of this pasuk that we recite from Mishlei every Friday night. Ki yesh Torah shel chesed. What it means? Torah's chesed. What does that phrase mean? Yesh Torah she'ena shel chesed. El Torah lishma zui Torah shel chesed. Shelo lishma zui Torah she'ena shel chesed. Kindness is something done for another without expectation of reward. That's called chesed. And if one studies Torah, if he studies it for the purpose of reward, that's not chesed. But if he studies it because of his love for Torah, his love for Hashem, that's called chesed. Ika di'amri, this is the more famous interpretation. Torah lelamda zuhi Torah shel chesed. If he studies Torah in order to transmit it to others, that's chesed. Shalol lelamda zuhi Torah she'ena shel chesed. A person should always study Torah for the sake and the purpose of teaching it to others. God is himself as Malami Torah Li'ama Yisrael. We should imitate God. And Torah's chesed al Lashona. Lashona means to communicate and transmit the Torah to others. The only difference is that if the Nisach Hayayin took place on Shabbos, or let's talk about the Nisach HaMayim on Shabbos of Sukkot, then they had to take a golden barrel of water from the Mei Shiloh on Erev Shabbos. It was not a Kli race, and they would leave it in the chamber of waters, the water gates that we spoke about yesterday, in order to use it on Shabbos for Nisach HaMayim. V'amai neisei b'mekudeshes. Why can't we find a way of taking the water from Meshiloch in a Kli Sharetz? And the answer you're going to give me is that we're worried about Lina, which means once it's sanctified with Kiddush Aguf by being placed in a Kli Sharetz, now we have a serious problem. If we leave it overnight, Friday night, it become possible Lina. So Gemara says that's not a problem. We have two solutions to that problem. Number one, a Kli Sharetz is only Makadesh if you have intention that it should be Makadesh. You don't have to have intention that it be Makadesh. Number two, it's got to be exactly the amount, the volume that's necessary for the avoda. Otherwise, the Kli Sharetz is not Makadesh. So why not, instead of 3 lugim, why not just put 4 lugim in? Omar Zeiri Kasavar Ein Shir Lamayim. He holds that when it says 3 lugim, it means minimum of 3 lugim, but it could be maximum. Ukli Sharetz Makadshim Shelo B'das. According to Zeiri, our Mishnah reflects that shita that rejects the condition of das, and even in the absence of intention, a Kli Sharetz is automatically makadesh that which is inside of it, and therefore that to be makpid, to take these golden, from the golden barrels, they would take it before it was sanctified by Kiddush Aguf, because these barrels were unconsecrated. They were not Kli Sharetz. Okay then? So, well, thank you very much. And again, if we do this again, I would really, really appreciate it if you could open your cameras. I mean, just else chesed. We're talking about chesed today. That would be a great chesed.